Right, I've drilled and tapped and fitted that T-piece to the bottom of the swing arm. So I've already got a cut end on this. So get your fitting, and while your tape's still on, you can just feed the bit over and just let that disappear, and then find the end of the tape, it's still on the reel at the minute, so it's a bit right, and hopefully this time it'll just come off as it's meant to. Right, so that time the tape came off a bit easier, it was just harder to find the end. And what I should have picked up was my standing knife blade, which actually is just here. Right, with the end, you can see just sort of there, there's like a plastic burr, if you want to call it that. Now basically, put the point of the blade in, this is how I do it, and face it away from the direction that you want to pull it. So and basically what happens is it just scrapes the burr away. And then you end up with a sort of cleanish hole. But I can see there's a bit, I can see myself on the camera, there's a tiny little bit in there. Now that might just be a bit of dust from the grinding, but what I'll just quickly do is grab the airline again and stick it up the other end of the hose and blow the hose out. Right, so that's blown the dirt out. Get your pointy tool, like I explained earlier. I mean, basically what I'm doing so far is exactly the same as what I did the first time. So flare the outer edge, the outer braiding, so that it's away from the inner pipe, and then put the olive on. Now the olive, as you can see, it's got a taper to it, so that the taper, as the wider end, if that's how you want to put it, is the end of the, I mean really it can only go on one way, it fits in there and it doesn't fit in there. So just make sure you've got no strands of the braiding, because as I said earlier, if you get even a single strand of the braiding in that olive, it won't seal. And that was quite lucky there, because I've actually managed to push that all the way on with my finger. Which is cool. Another way you can do it is grip the pipe and push it against something hard like that, and it just pushes it all the way on. So then get your fitting, and again just force it in. You can see it just goes all the way on. Bring your end up, push it over the braiding, and then turn. Just turn it on by hand as far as you can. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the braiding over here so that I've got this the other way around. And get the spanner on the fitting end. And then basically don't turn the fitting end, turn the actual because what happens is it turns, as it sort of turns, it crimps the olive onto the pipe. This is why I prefer doing it at bench. Turns the olive onto the pipe and seals it all. Oh, just make sure your spanner doesn't fall off. And that is basically nearly there. So spanner on properly. And that's tight. So that is that end on. So what I'll do now is I'll feed that through, and then I can mark up the pipe for the next bit. So I'll just shove that up there. Get it on the right side of the oil pipe. And bend it back down. I'm just going to disappear around the corner a second. I'm just going to screw this into the T-piece. Now what I've got is I can see that the pipe's actually twisting. And this is something you've got to take into account when you're putting fittings on that are like 90 degrees, and the next fitting that's going to go on is also at 90 degrees. You've got to work out where you want it. Oh, you fucking ass. The T-piece has come loose because I never tightened it up properly and it's been awkward. Right. So then lay it down under here. And work out where I want to cut that. But I took the fitting out, so I need to put the fitting back in. Right, and now I'll give her a bit of slack. Right, I got that in position where I want to cut it, and dumbass didn't have a pen in my hand. Right, I'll knock you off for a sec. I'll get this marked up and cut and made, and then we'll get on to the next section of these pipes. In fact, what I'll do is I'll make this bit of pipe up. Once I've got it made up, I'll fasten it in. Again, it's just going to be finger tight, but I'll get it fastened into place, and then I'll get the camera off and show you what the crack is so far. So I'll be back soon. Got this line on. Now it's loose, as you can see. That's can push inwards. Plus that's loose. That'll be sitting more straight than at that angle. It's just the way, because I haven't tightened it up. But when I actually do tighten these up, that'll be sort of in the way, pushed in the way should I say, so that that braided line is clearing over the top of there, rather than sitting against the swing arm pivot part. So it'll sit over there, which clears it. And then, as you can see, it goes down that side, and again, if I move that piece on the T-piece, see, once it's tight at that position, it's not touching anything. So that then goes down and goes on to that piece there, which, if I get underneath, I can show you a bit better hopefully. So this is where, try and have the camera in the other hand, this is where the cable's coming back down underneath. Well, it's going to there, which is, as I say, everything's loose at the minute. That'll be up sort of straight, but there'll also be a clamp screwed on to there to hold that pipe up against the bottom of the swing arm, and then it puts that in line. Then you've got your two bits equally spaced, and then I just need to run the lines down there to the calipers. Ooh. So the line will come along from there, come along from that T-piece underneath, and it's going to run up the line of the swing arm, and I'm going to see how it looks, because I might use this curved banjo fitting and loop the wire, the cable, I'll get there in the end, loop the pipe sort of round like that. I'm going to see, I'm going to move these axle stands and put them underneath these blocks, or I might even put them underneath that bit, so that I can see what my cables are going to be like. My pipes, sorry. So I'll knock you off for a minute. I'll get the axle stands repositioned. I also need to get that end off because I've still got the caliper sitting at the bottom on that side, so I'll turn that round as well so it's the same as this one, and then we'll have a way up how best to put, because as I say, if I can get it to loop round nicely there, that'll give you some slack, or if you need to take your caliper off, you'll have the room to take the caliper off. The other option was to put a straight one on, but I think it would be better having the curve round. And again, I might have one of the clips. The pipe will be held in place with these P-clips, basically. So obviously it goes around the pipe, and it bolts in under the, obviously it's going to be on the underside of the swing arm. And what I'll do is every so often there'll be one of these goes on, it'll be drilled and tapped. This is quite thick box on this swing arm as well, so drilling a few little holes. I'm only putting M6 holes in, so it's like I'm drilling a 4.8mm hole and tapping it out to M6. So it won't affect the structure of it, but there'll be a few of these clamps running round, holding all the brake lines in place. So right, knock you off and I'll come back soon. So I've made up this section from the T-piece to the caliper, and basically it'll come along as I've explained, clamp up underneath with the pipe clamps, and it just nicely loops round onto this bent, so I think that's like a 45-degree banjo fitting, and bear in mind this bit doesn't move, apart from if you alter your blocks backwards and forwards. Well, there's plenty on there that will allow that to go backwards and forwards. So what I've got left to do is I've got the same thing to make for the other side, but I've got the other side caliper to move yet, to put it in this position. So there's a lot of things to think about when you're doing like something that's not standard, let's say that, brake line. There's a couple of things that, well, there's a few things you've got to think about. So first thing, and the important thing, which I'm going to have a discuss about now, just a quick discuss, is putting it together properly. On the first one I did right at the front where it goes on the master cylinder, I did it wrong. Now there's a strong possibility that it might have been fine. You know, there's different trains of thought really when it comes to this, but the way my mind works, you've got your nipple, your olive here, you've got your pipe, you've got your fitting on your pipe that comes up, goes over your braid and goes over your olive and tightens onto there. So the way I did it, I had that in and I was turning that and holding this bit still. Now this bit's clamping the pipe. Now when I was turning that, the pipe wasn't turning. Now in my train of thought, this is just how my brain works, that will have been on, and that's got to squash down onto the inner pipe when you're winding that bit up tight. So if you imagine, the idea is that you clamp the pipe tight, equally tight all the way around, that's why it's tapered, etc. but you're clamping the pipe onto that as tight as you possibly can, obviously because you don't want it to leak. So by me turning the fitting itself, if that pipe's not moving, that means that fitting's turning inside the pipe. If that fitting can turn inside the pipe, the way I see it is that it can't seal. Now I might be 100% wrong on that. You know, I'm not sort of the world expert on putting brake lines together, but that's just how I see it. But if you do it the other way around, so that's stationary, as you're turning the bolt, the nut, sorry, the pipe nut, clamp, whatever you want to call it, the whole pipe turns with it, sort of thing. So you're pushing it on to the stationary fitting, and then it stops turning the pipe, and that gets tighter and tighter and pushes all the olive and everything up against that, and then it's all nice and snug. As I say, the first one I did, it might have sealed, it might have been absolutely spot on, but I've always done it where that bit screws on, not that bit. So I did, in my mind, I did the first one wrong, and that's why I redid it. So that's the first thing to think about when you're doing your own brake line kits, is put it together correctly. Now there might be people out there that say that's the correct way by turning that, or that's the correct way by turning that. Each to their own. It's just, in my mind, I think that is wrong. As I say, I might be wrong. I'll hold my hands up if I'm doing it wrong. I'll be the first one to admit it. But I've normally done it in the past. I do like car brake lines. That's why I have all this kit. I don't usually use this type of thing on motorbikes, because you can virtually buy ready-made brake lines for what you need. But it's only because I had to split it at the back to go dual calipers. But yeah, in my mind, sorry, the way I've always done it is I've always tightened that onto the fitting. So I've never had a leak. I tell a lie, I did have a leak once, and that's when I learnt the lesson of making sure, and it was on a car, not a bike, that you never get your braid inside that olive. Because when we took it to bits and looked, I'd actually got, believe it or not, a single strand of the braid had gone inside when I put the olive on, and that's what caused it to leak. And that's why I was stressing to you, make sure that there's not any of that braiding inside that olive. So yeah, the first thing is put it together properly. Secondly is, as I've been doing this pipe work and filming it, in a sense I've been making it up as I go along, because I'm having to route it so that obviously you've not got pipes hanging down underneath the bottom of the frame. You've got to think about things like sharp radiuses. You don't want a too sharp a radius, because there's a chance that you can kink the pipe, which restricts flow. Then, like on this bit where it goes over the swing arm, you can loosen this off and just lift up a bit. You probably still can't see. Yeah, maybe you can. In here, where I've got it looping up over the swing arm pivot, one is the radius, which is fine, it's not too tight, but when I was explaining about how I'll move the bit over slightly when I eventually tighten it up, so it puts it away from the swing arm so it doesn't chafe against the swing arm and possibly over time wear through. So that's another thing you've got to think about. But you've also got to think about nip points. You know, swing arm goes up and down, fair enough, not a lot of movement, but it goes up and down, so you've got to make sure that when it's going up and down it's not going to nip the pipe. So you've got to consider all these things, and I'll be truthful, I'm pretty much building this trike. My initial thoughts when I thought, right, I'm going to build a trike for girlfriend, was, oh, I need an axle at the back. That's probably as far as my planning went. Right, let's buy a rear axle kit. So most of this, I'm sort of, it's doing it properly. Don't get me wrong, I'm not just codging it. But the thought that's going into it is happening while it's being done, rather than planning ahead, which would make things probably go a lot quicker if I planned ahead. So yeah, a few things to consider when you're doing brake lines is, 1, put it together properly. 2, radiuses, you don't want them too tight so it kinks the pipe. 3, making sure that it's not against something where if it's a moving part like that bit of pipe there with the swing arm moving up and down, the pipe can move. So make sure it's not actually against anything that can rub, cause it to wear through. And nip points, make sure it can't be squashed in something, which the way it's done now, I've cleared all them points. So what I'll do, I'll knock you off again. I'm going to alter this, take this hub off, move the caliper around, and I'll make the line for this side. And once we've got that done, we'll come back and show you the last bit basically. I won't be tightening anything up as yet, because this is to come back out. 1, I've got to take this apart, grease it all up, make sure everything's got grease in it. 2, I want to paint all this before I put it back in, just by hand. But when it's all gone back together, that's when I'll nip everything up properly on these T-pieces and that. So also I've got these P-clips to position and drill and tap and bolt them on so that all these cables are nice and secure. It's cable, I keep calling them cables, the pipe, so it's nice and secure. And then I've also got to make a template on for the handbrake caliper to fit on. So yeah, for now I'll knock you off and I'll get this last brake line made up and get this caliper moved, should I say, and then make the brake line up. By rights it should be exactly the same as this one that I've just made, because that was mounted centrally, so each side should be exactly the same length. So I'll knock you off and I'll come back later. Right.